lump in his cheek. "Don't nothing else sound good?" Anna Mae clutched her stomach. No, nothing else sounded good. But if Dorothy were in the room, she would have some suggestions. White sugar, a peppermint stick, some bologna. How that child liked bologna on white bread. Anna Mae felt her stomach tilt. "No, I can't think of anything. Just take care of your own errands and bring me those beans, okay?" She held her breath as he scowled at her. His lips parted as if ready to speak. "Don't ask, Harley. Don't ask what's wrong again, or I'm liable to tell you. Annie, if you could have one thing from town, something you really, really wanted, what would it be?" She straightened her shoulders, her brows shooting upward. Harley wasn't one to play whimsical games, not since the banks collapsed and the drought struck, making it almost impossible to eke a living out of the land. She wasn't sure why he was asking, but she had an answer. "I'd get a fine new hat to wear to church on Sundays, a straw one, with little wax cherries or some silk flowers on it." A grin tugged at Harley's whiskered cheeks. Cherries on a hat? Only place I want to see cherries is in a pie. Anna Mae frowned and looked down at the scuffed linoleum floor. If he was going to poke fun at her answer, she wished he hadn't asked in the first place. "Bet you'd be the prettiest gal there wearing a hat like that." Her heart caught in her throat. "'Course I always thought you was plenty pretty, hat or no." Had he paid her a compliment? How long had it been since Harley had paid her a compliment? She slapped her chapped hands to her face. "Oh, Harley." His grin broadened. Snatching his battered hat from the peg beside the door, he plopped it over his shaggy brown hair before heading outside. Anna Mae crossed to the open doorway and watched him stride toward the barn. Even in those worn-out clothes, there was no disguising the handsome man beneath. Wide shoulders tapered to narrow hips. Strong legs carried him across the dusty ground. Firm arms swung with determination, as if he were heading to a meeting of diplomats instead of their weather-beaten barn to hitch up mules to an old wagon. It was Harley's way of walking that had captured her attention when he'd wandered onto the Elliott property 8 years ago and asked her daddy for a job. There was such pride in the way he carried himself. And then she'd looked into his eyes, those twinkling blue eyes that made her want to look into them until everything else faded away. It had been a long time since she'd allowed herself to get lost in the depths of Harley's eyes. Sighing, she turned away from the side of her husband and closed the door against the wind that carried bits of grit into the house. Her gaze fell on the remaining dry biscuit on the table. She picked it up and nibbled an edge. Her stomach rolled. Maybe she should ask Harley to buy a tin of saltines. Saltines had helped her get through the early weeks of carrying Marjorie. Dropping the biscuit onto the plate, she hurried through the back porch, swung open the screen door, and called to Harley. Wind whipped a strand of hair into her mouth. She tugged it loose and anchored it behind her ear. He appeared in the wide doorway of the barn. "Yeah?" She pressed her hand against her stomach. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe it was just the heat. Maybe... No. She knew. "Can you pick up a tin of saltines from the store?" She couldn't tell since he stood in the shadow, but she thought she saw him frown. "Saltines?" She swallowed. "Yes." With a nod, he turned away. Closing the door, she slumped against it and pressed her fist to her trembling lips. "Dear God, they're supposed to be blessings. But this time..."